Hey, guys, it is Alison from Alison Answers and Logger Counseling Services. I have my friend, Angie Manson, here today. Look at how cute she is. Look at her
Ah,
background. It's perfect. And she will lap that shit up as much as she can. But what I want to say, guys, is you're going to love listening to Angie. Angie's going to talk about everything that she's accomplished in her life. We happen to be in the same field. She's been in the field of addictions and therapeutic work for 29 years. And we share that in common. We also both are members of Arate Syndicate, and that's where we became fast friends. And the thing about Ange is that she's gonna really walk you through her backstory and how she came to be owning and running a facility that's an addictions rehab with a different flavor on how to really overcome the addictions that people suffer from. So, put on your listening ears and take out a pad and pen. And I have never seen Angie look so proper. And it's true. Sorry.
they're very professional here today for
She's
you.
an authentic chick. She also has the podcast Going Rogue. It is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
She's being so polite.
No.
Okay. But anyhow, so Ange, tell us, give us the really the raw, the backstory, how you decided to go into the field of addictions, how you decided to really not just do that, but become a badass entrepreneur, start a podcast, like all the different things that you've developed over these years. We always know there's a backstory to it, and usually there's the dark work behind the light that we see. So I would love for you would you walk us through that and share it?
Absolutely. So for me, I started on my path of addiction at a very young age. I was drinking and using at the age of 11. My mom had me very young and she would work 2 jobs. I was a latchkey kid, so I had a lot of time home alone and with the other kids in the neighborhood in a similar situation. So I was getting myself into a lot of trouble at a really young age. By 16, I was in my first rehab. My mom put me in. And by the time I was 18, I'd been arrested 7 times. And that did not change for me when I turned 18. I not understanding how things get a little rougher as you're an adult. So I continued on that path and continued to get into deeper and deeper type of drugs and crime and different situations like that. So by the time I was 20, I was facing 10 years in prison for my wrongdoings. And luckily for me at that time, I had a public defender who said, listen, Angie, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the judge and say you have a drug problem. He will hopefully give you drug diversion in a rehab as opposed to this prison time. And at that point in time, I was like, yeah, but I don't have a drug problem. I was very much in denial about this. He's like, okay, cool. But can you see that if you do have a drug problem, we're going to handle this and you're not going to go to prison? And I'm still in denial. Oh, okay. Okay. So I don't really have one. We know that, right? But I'm just going to say I do. And he said, yes, exactly.
She had
So
no problem lying.
yeah. So I agreed to go along with it, even though here I am 20 years old
Yes.
and facing 10 years in prison. Obviously, there's a problem there.
You
So I agreed to go along with it. And
don't
the
want to
judge,
tell us what you did?
so I had gotten a job at a car rental agency. And because I worked there, they allowed me to rent the car on cash. And I had moved back home to Reno, which is where I was living with my grandparents again. And I decided I wanted to go visit my friends in Santa Cruz, where I had been, and I'd been getting in a lot of trouble. Well, after I was in Santa Cruz for a little while, I got in a pretty significant car accident and the car was totaled. So I not only did not go back to work, but I did not return that car, and I actually didn't go back to Reno. And so it was about a year and a half later where I was doing something dumb again. I was stealing a chicken from Safeway. I don't know why. I thought it was a good idea. But the cops ran my name and they're like, wait a minute, you've got a warrant for a felony. And I was like, wait, what? It was brand new news to me. So the car rental place had filed embezzlement charges on me because I'd worked there. And because the damage was more than $10,000, it was elevated to a felony, which holds up to 10 years in prison. So that's what I was facing when I went in front of the judge.
You know what? It's interesting. I don't want to stop your story, but I find it interesting now that we're adults and we think about when we were 20 or, these younger ages, you could totally see just by neglect of doing things when we're younger, how you could end up in jail. Cause like you could see that wasn't like actually, you just like didn't, I don't know, you didn't return the car. I could totally see myself thinking that was like, okay.
Yeah.
When I was
And
younger.
the longer it went, it was like the harder to go back. It's kind of like,
Yeah,
I don't,
right.
yeah.
I get
Yeah.
it. So it's interesting. Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
And I think the judge saw that too. It's like, this isn't a hardened criminal, you're not an armed robber. There was, this is a young girl. And obviously, the situation occurred. So fortunately for me, the judge did offer in lieu of prison, I could go to rehab for a year and then I would be on probation for 3 years and I would have this $13,000 of restitution for the car to pay off. And at that time, and still at this time, it's very difficult to find a rehab that's willing to take you for a year. That's not the typical duration.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also came from a pretty low income family. Like I had said, single mom. So there was no finances to put me somewhere for a year. So I did end up going to this rehab that my best friend had gone to prior in her other friend's dad's house, and I couldn't afford it. So within a month of just being a client there, I started working in order to get my keep up for the staying there and being able to do the program. So after the year, I went back to the judge. I had this great letter. I had been giving back. I had been doing better. I felt pretty good about it. And he said, okay, you've done amazing progress. This is great. Now you just have 2 more years of probation. You got to come back and see me every 6 months, and you still have that restitution that you have to pay for. And for me, what am I, 21 now? I'm like, having that 10 years hanging over my head, if I do anything wrong like that, that sentence was going to be leveraged against me. And literally the only people I knew were people that were not doing good things. So at that point, I knew my only decision was to stay put and keep working there and keep going back every 6 months so that I could keep out of trouble, so that I could finish the sentence without going to prison.
Yeah. Smart.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I did. And in that time, I was giving back and I started learning every position within the organization, which for me was really cool because I'd barely graduated high school, and it wasn't lack of intelligence. It's just like I never showed up. So for me, it was really cool to get back into learning and getting like sobriety with a group and learning every position. Now I'm in finance. Now I'm in admissions. Now I'm delivering the program. Now I'm counseling. And I became the right-hand man of the executive director. He viewed me like his own daughter. And so at the end of the 3 years, I went back to the judge and I had all my glowing letters of recommendation, all the progress I'd made. And my public defender said, listen, Angie, I got to tell you, the prosecuting attorney is going to recommend another 3 years because you've not paid back that restitution, that $13,000 that was out there. And I was like, shit. Even though, back then minimum wage was a lot less, and it was a law, we didn't really abide by it. And I didn't even care because I had a roof over my head and cigarettes, and I didn't care. Like, I was earning my keep by living there, but I had not been able to attack that restitution at all. So we went in front of the judge, and the prosecutor gave his little spiel about wanting me to do, 3 more years. And the judge looked at him and said, I so rarely get to enjoy successes in this courtroom that I finally have somebody who's turned their life around. I've got to see this whole thing. I don't even know what more you could possibly want from this girl. You were paid that insurance 3 years ago. And he kind of like dismissed him. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And then he looked at me and he said, young lady, You have more than paid back your debt to society. I'm so proud of you and all the work that you've done. Not only am I taking away that restitution, I am clearing your record and you are free to go on with your life, doing what you do, and I hope I never see you again, more or less.
I love that.
And yeah. And so I just broke down crying, thanking him. And he assured me, this isn't me, this was you. And it was like full redemption. It's like when you get a pardon, it was exactly like that. Like, I didn't even know that he had it in his power to take away all of that. And he did. And so from that point on, I'd already found my passion and purpose in giving back to everybody and loving what I was doing. And so I just continued to stay. And here I still am 20, almost 9 years later, giving back. And obviously I took over the organization from him and we made our own program and doing all that.
So, Ange, so that was like your first life lesson in like badass entrepreneurship, like drive, doing the right thing right there, right?
Yeah.
I did not know that you took over that organization.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So then that you took over what you were so you've been working in that particular place since you're a little girl, basically 20, right? What an unbelievable story.
Yeah.
So now when you took over so tell us more. So what happened then? How did you end up taking it over? You
So
just
it was,
stayed and continued?
Yeah. So it was a nonprofit. And so, I told you I was working, side by side with the executive director, and he viewed me as his daughter. I was always loyal, faithful, it was my obligation to do right by him because in my mind, he had saved my life. And we loved that program. It, got me sober. We saved thousands of lives. But at some point that particular program, they wanted to alter their program and their management. And at this point, I had been the executive director of this organization for like 15 years or almost 20 years. And we looked at it and said, you know what, we're not confident with the size that we've grown, because I had almost, 80 staff at that point, that the changes that they want to make, we're actually going to be successful or be able to continue to fill our beds and grow. And so we decided at that point to transition away from that program, create our own program, bring all of our staff with us and start Elevate. And that's what we did about 8 years ago. And so we created our own program that we've been delivering ever since then.
And it's at the same facility, right?
Yes, at the same facility,
Amazing.
all my same staff, like my executive team. There's about 18 of us, and we've all worked together for 10 plus years, most of us closer to 20 years. And so, I mean, with this team, there's nothing that we can't do. And so, that's what we did. And we created Elevate. We've been tracking our results since day one for outcome studies. We know the efficacy of the program. We see it every day. And it's pretty awesome.
Tell us about the program and your like how it became born, like what made you. It's not the same program as he had originally had, right? So you've created something.
Yeah, we created it with our 20 years of experience and also understanding what like insurance will pay you for, it has to be legitimate type stuff that they view as legitimate. So we built the program around that. And I had at that point had been finally found, first time in my life, a passion for exercise. And so I knew that I wanted CrossFit to be part of this program because there's so much of CrossFit that translates to overcoming addiction. I mean, a lot of people who do CrossFit, they become addicted to CrossFit, which isn't a terrible thing. And there's this camaraderie, there's this pushing your limits, there's the endorphins, there's the working out together, there's having to be. The thing that I loved about it is when you walk into that gym, you could have so much stuff going on, but you have to be 100% present. You can't be thinking about, did this client come in? Did that situation happen? It's like, you have to pay attention because there's barbells, there's coaches, there's clocks, and for me, there was so much peace in being in the present instead of swirling around with all this information. So I knew that this would translate really well to overcoming addiction because addicts tend to get stuck in the past. They're constantly thinking about their past transgressions or future tripping or what I'm going to do. And if you can find that peace in a gym, you can find that anywhere. And so CrossFit became a cornerstone of the new program.
Could I ask you about that for a second? Because
Sure.
what came to mind when you were saying it is I remember I would think about in relationship to any kind of recovery, just even for myself, was that it was almost like it was the parent I never had, like I was like, there was no guidance,
Yeah.
so having that kind of those bumpers around you. And I feel like CrossFit is kind of like that. When you go in there, there's what's required of you, right? You know what the plan is, right? And
Yes.
I think I think that with a lot of addicts, there can be a lack of, or people doing shit for you instead of guiding you toward it. And then you're responsible for it yourself. So do you feel like that's a big part of it?
It is. The community is a huge aspect. So when you're deep in addiction, you're like usually by yourself. You close yourself off
Yeah.
from the rest of the world because you
Hmm.
don't want to be accountable or you don't want to expose people. And so CrossFit forces you into a community type setting where you're working together and you have a common goal and you're listening, like you said, listening to instruction. And it's a very health conscious, health minded group. And so for us, because we're not AA or NA affiliated, we want people to have healthy communities to go back to when they leave.
That's
And
awesome.
it's awesome if you're like into going to Gold's Gym and you do your little routine by yourself, but it's even more awesome when you can go join a group of like-minded healthy individuals wherever you live with the common goal of getting fit and learning how good working out feels.
Yeah. Yeah. Like replacing that high, right?
Oh,
What?
100%, because
Yeah.
that's the other thing that's a big differentiator with us is other rehabs will, let's say you go in on alcohol. Within a week, you're put on about 8 different kinds of medications to handle your addiction. Oh, here,
Exactly.
this is to help you sleep. This is to stabilize your mood. This is for, to get up in the morning. This is so you can focus. And people are sitting around so medicated and so high, but now they're being called sober because they're not using illicit drugs or alcohol. And so for us, we're like, that's not really being sober and that's not really living your life. And so we take everybody off all medications before they even leave detox. 100% medically supervised. We're not doing anything that's going to injure or, hurt anybody,
Yes.
but they can't even leave the detox area to
Mhm.
start the program until they're completely drug free. And so then what ends up happening once they're off medications is now they've got to reset their bodies to calibrate to be able to do normal functions without drugs and alcohol. And so CrossFit's a quick way to get all those endorphins moving, sleeping better, eating better because you're feeling better. And
Yes.
it's a really great way to kickstart that process as opposed to just relying on chemicals to even out that situation and be that way for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So when they come in, do they, like, let's say a typical day, is that how they start? They start their day with CrossFit?
No, our classes are after the day. They start the
Okay.
day with typical chores like make your bed, eat your breakfast, client assembly, and then we have a copyrighted curriculum. So they'll start working on in their books, their processes. They'll do teams, they'll do groups. We'll do experiential. Sometimes we do rock to recovery, and then CrossFit is like the last thing we do. We've looked at doing it in the morning, but sometimes it can kind of I don't want to say wreck you, but sometimes physical activity, especially for somebody who's never done it, can, make things a little hard on you. So we save that for last.
But yeah, that's cool. So, Ange, how do you feel like, what's the vulnerability part, for you? Like, I mean, I know that you're, just giving to people is incredible, but do you work with them on their, like, on their mindset, on their thinking, their childhood? And do you relate, like, I mean, being raised by young people yourself, be right? I mean, think you had started
Yeah.
drinking at 11.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I used to think this was a bad thing, but I've realized what a strength it is 90% of my staff have all overcome addiction. So they've been there. So when we're working with clients, we are more effective because we understand we've been through it ourselves. And some people are like, this is great. So you can be super empathetic and sympathetic of their situations. It's like, yeah, to some degree, but also we can hold them more accountable and not be victims of a disease. We are in control of having created this situation and condition. And so we are in control of overcoming it. And so it actually gives us more leverage to hold people more accountable because we actually do understand what they're going through because we've all been through it ourselves.
There's nothing like being known and understood. There's nothing like it. I think just even that moment that happens, healing has begun, don't you? Just
100%. And we hear it from the clients all the time. Like, this is what's so great about here is everyone's so genuine. You guys have been through this. You guys actually understand me. It's not someone in a lab coat that got their
yes.
education about addiction in a college. Like, you guys have all actually lived this life, and they're
Yes.
so much more open to the process because they understand that if they just do what we did, they're going to be successful as well.
I love it. And don't you feel like, I know for me, like in our counseling centers, I just jump on people when I'm interviewing who have, who have gone through an eating disorder and recovered, or whatever it is, any kind of traumatic loss, because to me that it like stops the shame, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, how many addicts are just riddled with shame? I mean, most of us, you don't even have to be a quote unquote addict.
Right. Well, and I think part of that is because of other philosophies. They leave you in your addiction your entire life. It's not who I used to be. You could have 20 years sober and you're like still saying you're an addict. And it's like, but you haven't used in 20 years. And so you're almost purposely labeling and keeping yourself at this level, even though you've overcome it. So we like to look at it as overcome your addiction. That doesn't define who you are. That's who you were. Of course, we never forget, our past and why we're here. And obviously we got to be careful and not go down that path again, but you can overcome these adversities. They don't have to define you and be who you are. They can be who you used to be. And now you're not just sober, but you're a kick-ass individual in life who's happy and productive and doing good things and leaving all that crap behind you instead of living in it every single day for the rest of your life.
It's so true, Angie, and it's so in line with so much of what you and I talk about, that thoughts are things, that thoughts are creating. And if we really knew the power of our thoughts, would we be saying anything? I don't even want to say the words, but like something to do with finance, where you're POOR, or I am,
FAT,
FAT, or I am, an addict. The thing, it's whatever, everything after the word everything after I am defines us. And it sets the whole course ahead for the rest of our lives, right?
Yes.
I mean,
and imagine if you were saying that to yourself every day for the rest of your life. Like, how far are you going to climb? How good are you going to get?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even agree more. And it's, it's the value, first of all, and it's really the discovery when somebody admits. So like nothing changes until it becomes what it is, right? So first you have to know, but then after that, it doesn't, then you want to project into what you want to be, right, Ange? Like, who
and that's
do I
our whole
want to
premise
be?
is empowerment, not powerless. Because when you're empowered, you can do anything. When you're powerless, you have no cause. You're just like, floating through life and letting it happen to you because you're powerless. Like, I so disagreed with that point, which is why the previous modalities never stuck with me, because I knew I wasn't powerless. I mean, and I wasn't going to agree to being powerless because for me, that was disempowering. And so instead, let's empower people to overcome this as opposed to being a victim of it the rest of their life.
Yeah. So how do people like come into your program? Like what because we have people here all the time. Like how does that work? You take insurance? I mean all of that, right?
Yeah. We're in network with Blue Cross. But every insurance policy is different. Every carrier is different. It's a constant battle and they're constantly changing. Obviously we take cash. We are not government funded. And we advertise with, our website, business development, word of mouth obviously is really good. That's why I started the podcast, was to reach more people. And we just try to get the word out in any way we can, because we realize it's It's difficult to make that choice, especially if you've failed in rehabs and you think there's one way and it's the only way. And unfortunately for us, this industry got very corrupted many years
It did.
ago, the whole
Yeah.
Florida thing.
Yes.
And the bad players were doing such bad stuff that they came in and imposed some very big laws on the rest of us. And so it's definitely made it more difficult to sort of navigate surviving a lot of the stuff that because that had to be changed because of the bad people. And so also, it's drug rehab is like the top 3 most competitive field on Google.
Is
So
it?
yeah, so we as like a little mom and pop ish organization are competing against Acadia and all these very deep pocket $1 million budget type of people in order to try to get the word out there. So it's definitely challenging for sure.
How would you describe like what's special about it? Because I know the CrossFit, I mean, I saw like videos and stuff. So like, well, how would you describe the experience there?
So I would say it's whole body, mind, and soul.
Yeah.
So we have the body, which is CrossFit. We also do mindfulness. So we teach people literally from the first day they come in up at detox, where they could barely even sit still, to sit in the chair. And then every day they're there, we work on mindfulness, because if you can learn how to, if you're feeling triggered, if you want to use, if there's a situation occurring, find your breath, breathe through it, let it pass. So that they can take into the world. They don't have to, if they don't get their breath, they're going to like relapse. They can take that with them, and anywhere, any situation, they remember that tool, they can overcome any situation. So mindfulness is really big with us. We also have a whole copyrighted curriculum, like I told you about, where one of the very first things we do is address the trauma. And it's interesting because I used to think, oh, well, let's save that till later, layers of an onion. Like we don't want to go there until they're more stable because they're confronting some pretty dark stuff. But the reality is, until you confront that dark stuff, you can't move forward. So it's one of the very first things we do is get them to process and recognize what put them on this path, why they started doing it, and then recognizing the triggers, whether it's seasonal or loss or whatever it is that really puts them in a spot to want to keep this path up. And then once they're through that, then we work on identifying toxic people. We work on accountability and responsibility. They've got to rebuild the trust with their families. And a lot of that comes with total open and honest, so that the families know when they see or hear this stuff again, what's really going on. So we build in that accountability. Amends, obviously, it's a huge part of it. As any kind of addict or alcoholic, you've done a lot of damage, and it's important to make up for that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you find like for yourself that you relate? I mean, I know you relate, but do you remember like going through your own trauma, like looking at what was triggering you?
Yeah.
Like I mean, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want, but you said you're an open book. Tell us the shit, Ange. Yeah, if you had to talk to someone who's listening, who was like just entrenched in it, and they like what kinds of trauma like led you to pick up to use?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because everybody has trauma of some degree, every single human being. And I mean, not to be rude, but you're not special. It's just how some people choose to deal with it. Some people go the hard route. Like I've talked to Navy SEALs, and the way they did is they went super hard and they blocked all that out. And now I'm going to, go this other route. Other people didn't have those kind of coping mechanisms, so they ended up in addiction. And other people were like, I'm never going to do any of that. And they go on to lead a very normal life. But often what's seen, I mean, I would very common is some kind of abuse as a child, whether it's sexual, emotional. I didn't have a dad. So for me, there was a lot of trauma surrounding, a single mom who was working 2 jobs and no dad. Being poor, that was a big trigger for me. There was definitely sexual abuse. So there's all kinds of things, but there's always some kind of trauma that needs to be addressed. It's just what did you do to handle that? and then taking accountability and responsibility for having made those choices, not for necessarily what was done to you, but what you then chose as your coping mechanism, which led you down a pretty dark path.
It's cool because like, I mean, all of the, I've had all of that, same thing for me, sexual abuse, neglect, all of that. But I think, it's interesting that the different, like you were describing, like how having people not be reactive, basically reacting to it, and the mindfulness, right? That's the thing that, you're not reacting to what's happening around you. Head, heart, feet, all in the same spot, right? And it's like,
100%.
yeah.
Well,
So
and
I feel,
especially in
yeah, go ahead.
today's times, because everybody, it's almost like you have to have something wrong with you in order to be normal. It's like you want to be defined by these horrific events, and almost like it's a badge of honor. And it's like become so commonplace to just almost showcase your trauma,
Yeah.
as opposed to saying, shit, that sucked. And you know what? I didn't deserve it. But what I did after that wasn't great. That was then. This is now. Let's not have that define us.
I love that, Ange, so much, because how many times do we go to conferences and stuff, and or whatever, social media, and that is the popularity, like the
Yeah.
struggle, right? And and I think that sometimes people will want to like have like maybe me share like any of my difficulty as the showcase of like maybe what I am. But basically, if you really think about it, like what you're describing, it's like who we are. Those are just, these are, it's exactly just behaviors to deal with the shame. Like the drugs and alcohol are just behaviors. They're just the symptom
Yeah.
of whatever, right? And
Yeah.
I love that if we can normalize the fact that, we all get hurt, there's all difficulties, but now here's the great path, right? What is our choice? Like we
Yeah.
all have a choice not to be a victim, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's become too big in society, where we're
Yeah.
just coddling victims. And that's the cool thing. Like I saw my daughter grow up through that, like through summer camps. And it's like, year after year, it got worse. And it's like, if you weren't a specific pronoun, an eating disorder, you're not suffering depression, anxiety, you're not bi, there's something wrong with you if you're normal.
Exactly.
Like you have to have
Exactly.
something wrong with you in order to be normal, which is so
Yes.
bizarre.
It's popular.
It is.
Yeah.
When you subscribe to that, then you're not overcoming it. You're just allowing it to be who you are. And so that's why I think it's really important to, I don't want to say man up, but take accountability and responsibility for the situations that you've created, maybe spawned out of something horrific that happened to you. But that's how we get better, is we say, well, what can I do either differently going forward? And how can I not do that again? And it's coming up with solutions, not just being okay with all these problems.
You know what's interesting, like what I'm thinking about when you're saying it is like you're like allowing people to own their behavior, right?
Yeah.
You're allowing people to not blame, which is interesting to me because anybody who's traumatized or like a victim of something, let's just say victim, or they're victimized, they're not a victim, they're victimized by sexual abuse or something. The natural tendency we have is to absorb the shame of the other person, the other person's behavior. Now I feel disgusting because of what you did to my body, let's say.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, it's like this twist that you have, which I love, because we would not naturally, we would be like, oh, you know what, it's not your fault, which is true, but your way of doing it is normalizing. I hope I'm going to say this right. Tell me if you think this is true. You're
Okay.
normalizing the mistakes we make, which makes them not as shameful. Does that make
100%.
sense?
100%. It's the human condition. Nobody is
Yes.
perfect. None of us are Jesus Christ. Like we make mistakes, and sometimes it's by accident. We think we're doing the right thing and it's the wrong thing, but it's still a mistake. And so there still has to be recognition of, I should have done that better. I could have done that better, or I'm not going to do that again. But if we allow us to be victims of everything, nobody's ever going to get better. We're all just going to get worse and worse and worse.
It's like then that societal pull, you know, and, you know, we don't have to get into the whole like political realm, but it's like that idea of like, you know, you're not a good human if you're not doing things for people that they can do for themselves, basically. Like like you're somehow a bad person. But when you really genuinely want someone to get better, the communication would have to be, you're capable. I know you can do this. And
Yeah.
that's what that, it sounds like you're coming from that like internal fortitude, you know, like you can do shit. You can change your life. Like that is a power, isn't it? It's
It's
everything.
100% of power. 100%. And I think the other thing that's really big, and one thing that, which is why inpatient residential is really good, is because a lot of times, and especially again in society today, is feelings are not okay. You're allowed to have depression and anxiety, but at the same time, that's probably not okay. So let's medicate you for that, because you shouldn't have feelings and emotions. And it's like, but sometimes you need feelings and emotions. If somebody died, you should cry. If somebody ran into your car while you're just sitting there, you could and should probably be mad. Like, emotions are okay. It's part of the process. Like, we don't have to numb everything out all the time and just live a very boring existence. Like, and so that's what we try to teach them, is like, just because you get sober and you're in recovery doesn't mean anything outside of here has changed. Like, people are still just as messed up. Your home life's probably going to be just as hard. Your job's going to be even harder. Okay. You're going to go through a lot of these emotions and they might suck, but you can get through it and you can experience it. And it's okay to have emotions.
Yeah, that's really good. You know, it's like, I feel like it's almost like, it sounds funny, but it's like blowing your nose or going to the bathroom. Like we wouldn't say, seriously, it's like taking a shit. Like, come on, like don't hold it in. Like it's energy and motion. It's emotion. Just let it pass through your body, right? Like
Yeah. Let it go.
and also we're teaching people by saying everything. Like if I'm sad, I'm depressed. Like my daughter would say that she's having, that she's anxious. I'd say, well, how about you're nervous because you're about to go on a lead in a play? Isn't that normal to be nervous? Like, where did it become, I'm having an anxiety attack? Because it's like this psychological pop culture. I think you and I, we're in the field and we're like, oh my God, wait a minute. Everybody's a narcissist. I doubt it.
Yep.
Am I
Right.
selfish at times? Yes. Do I like to look in the mirror at times? Yes. Does it mean I'm a narcissist? No.
No,
Okay. That's
you do
all.
not fit in that box, and you're not going to label me that either.
Exactly.
But
We're
again,
really
it goes
careful of
along with,
that.
yeah, but it goes along with, everybody thinks there has to be something wrong with them. It's like, no, you don't have
Yeah.
to. You don't have to have something wrong. You don't have to
No.
suffer from depression. You could be sad because your boyfriend broke up with you. Totally acceptable. Like, it's interesting because it just seems like society is just giving people so many ways out of confronting and dealing with situations. Mask it, cover it, put it down. It's a condition, it's a label. Like they just don't want us to be our best versions of ourselves.
No, it's funny, Ange. Like I find here, you know, because we have to hire people, right? And we have to get the right therapist and they have to align with our core values. And
Yeah.
one of the things I'm always I don't want to say up against, but it's a thing that we're always looking out for is that, you know, therapists also can hide behind diagnoses.
Yes.
Like, oh, they're this. I don't let them do that. Like we do the diagnosis for insurance, but that's because we have to. But
Right.
when it comes to you, I tell them when the person sits in that chair, I want you to see their greatness. I don't care what's in front of you. That doesn't matter. Like that's just their current, the ramifications of where they had been. Now, where do you, what is the possibilities for this person, right?
Right.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly what we do too. Like I said, we track results from the day they come in. So they're doing like little daily surveys, and 99% of people coming into treatment suffer from depression and anxiety. Of course, they're addicts, alcoholics, they've hurt their families, they've lost their jobs, they're facing jail. Like everybody presents with depression and anxiety. But just by taking care of yourself and doing the right thing, when those people are leaving, 97% of them now don't suffer from depression and anxiety because they invested in themselves. They did the work. They didn't get assigned a label that now they're living with, that, that's the best I can do. I'm just, suffer from that. We take all that away and say, no, you don't have to have any of that. You can just go be a happy individual without the need of carrying all that baggage with you and the labels and the things that people want you to carry in order to not have to be accountable or responsible for anything that happens in your life.
I just did this video on because we talk about, like, with codependency, like the abandonment of self in order to please other people. And I was thinking about it, and the other twist is that, like, a codependent person, they also will create an atmosphere for an addict or whoever to abandon themselves by doing things for them, which communicates that they're not capable. So that, like, they lose themselves, their identity, right? It's like, who
100%.
am I? Now it's like, now I have this hero who's going to take care of me because I need it because I'm bad.
Yeah.
You ever hear, like, with, like,
Oh, yeah.
this chronic late stage alcoholic who's married to the saint?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what kind of bullshit is that whole thing?
Oh,
That
yeah.
whole thing is just a story. It's just the family dynamics. She's not a saint. They're in the same situation,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
right?
and those are our toughest demographics to get
Yeah,
better, because if we can handle the family, and a lot of it is educating them on,
yeah,
you're kind of enabling or perpetuating the situation by treating them in this specific manner. So
yeah,
let's alter how we look at things. They're not sick. They're not this. Hold them accountable and responsible. But the ones that we struggle with are the ones in that exact scenario that you mentioned,
yeah.
because even though they went there, they're like, I'm better. They're like, okay, see, they're better. I believe it, because their codependency, they don't actually want them to get better, because
Mhm.
then they will feel worse about themselves. Or, like you said, now what's their place if they don't need them in the same way? So those are really the toughest demographics for us, where there's such a deep codependent relationship that one of them getting sober endangers the other one.
Yeah, and because look, that's their addiction, right? To lose themselves.
Yeah.
When your addict gets better and suddenly you have no identity, like, you're not a hero anymore, like,
Right.
it's so compelling, it keeps you from having to feel your own pain, shame, and all that shit inside, right?
Exactly. And so therefore they're
I've
not going to
walked
be a
that
strong
walk a little bit
Yeah,
here and
yeah, well,
there.
they're not gonna be a strong support system. They're gonna be like, "Of course you can have a drink. You're better now, right?" Like, they're gonna want them to get back in that position of needing them. They're never gonna get better, either
Or
one of them.
controlling it, like,
Right.
"Don't have the drink, da, da, da," like that whole thing, right?
Yes.
The,
Yeah.
it's incredible how we all fall into these scripts, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, to really overcome an addiction, you have to address every area of your life, and recognizing, because a lot of times well-intentioned people are the ones that are the worst for us, because we don't realize the toxicity because of their own issues are the ones that are preventing us from actually getting better.
Like, I think about it, like, in this, like, we have the human body, right? With, like, all of the like, the feelings that we feel the most, we become addicted to, and like, we have the same thoughts we thought yesterday, right? That just keep running. And then I think about, like, the family. It's like it's the same exact thing, because whatever the feeling dynamic is, the actual family becomes addicted to it. And in order to maintain, like, any kind of baseline or homeostasis, they want to get that addict back sick so that they can all feel whatever it is, shame,
Right.
blame, who knows, right? It's
100%.
so good. Like, if people just knew, and you don't even have to be an addict,
Yeah.
just to know, wait a minute, I'm in a script right now. If I just change the way I interact, the whole situation changes, right?
Absolutely. Well, and that's part of the recognition of the dysfunction. There's so many different types of dysfunction. And if you can, like, remove yourself from it and then look at it from an outside perspective, it's like, wow, there's so many cognitive disassociation, what is that? Cognitive.
Dissonance.
You got it. There's so many different kinds that, when you're in it, you couldn't possibly recognize it. But when you can step back and look in, you could recognize it and hopefully change that from being normal to something that's healthier.
Yes. And it's really, isn't it just always just knowing the truth?
Right.
It's like the pathway to everything that's free, you know?
100%.
Like, nothing changes till it becomes what it is, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's why that's such a big part of our program is just like identifying it exactly as it is. That's one of our sayings. It is what it is. It's called radical acceptance, and
Mhm.
until you can actually see it for what it is, it's never going to change. It's just an illusion.
Yeah. Do you like what do you think that has has created your drive?
I
Would you
think
say that you're driven? You're obviously driven.
I
Would you say that you
would say I'm a
are?
little driven. I have this
Just a
unusual
bit,
amount of energy. It's very
just a
bizarre.
tad. Yeah, I know you're
I
driven.
Yeah, I would just say wanting to disrupt the industry and change the world, like, and to give people back themselves. Take the stigma off of addicts and alcoholics because you'd meet my staff, you would never know these people were all former addicts or alcoholics. They're kick-ass individuals. And
Yeah.
like if we can continue to give people the proper help and turn them loose on the world, like the impact that it's going to create because there's your sphere of influence. So for me, it's like, okay, yes, we're getting this one person recovered or sober, but they affect at least 5 people around them. So imagine, I help 1,000 people. I'm really helping 5,000 people, and the,
100%.
the effect continues to grow. So that's my big goal is to, impact the world and get everybody better and healthy and clear headed and fit and physically and healthily feeling good. And yeah, that's my goal. And I am very passionate about it because I've seen it. I've gosh, probably 10,000 people in the last
Yeah.
28 years. We've gone through our program. So there's nothing more inspiring than that.
It's like what you're saying, like the once you get a taste of that and you watch, like I think about people like what you're saying. If you work with one, I have one girl who started working and not working here. She was a client, 13, and she just stayed with me, through all her struggles in her life and whatever. And now she works here. She's a therapist, right? But
Wow.
she's like one of the best ones because basically she did the work. She actually I trained her too. I mean, a therapist,
Of
but I'm
course.
just saying,
Just like I train
yeah,
my guys. Yeah.
I did that shit. No, I'm just kidding. But the thing is, like, think about it. Like the how many people come in who would be terrible parents, who would, they're gambling, whatever it is. And then when they get free, like generations to come, like infinite
Infinite.
children who don't have to, be raised in an alcoholic home or, right? I mean, there's so many, it's incredible, so far reaching.
Absolutely.
Which how,
Absolutely. And then we change those generations and,
yes.
going forward over and over and over again. 100%.
Tell us about your podcast.
So, my podcast, the original one I started was called the Elevate Experience, and that spawned out of the pandemic. Luckily, we were able to stay open due to it being an essential business. However, we really needed to limit the amount of people coming and going to make sure the clients were safe and their staff were safe. And so, I was able to mostly work remote. But for me, being such a big community and in the business, it was really trying for me. So I was like, well, how can I reach more people? Because if I'm feeling this way, I know there's tons of people out there feeling the same way. So we created the Elevate Experience to start just being a voice out there. You're not alone. Here's what's going on. Here's about our rehab. How can we help you? How can you help someone else? And from there, I decided to sort of rebrand and respawn Going Rogue with Angie Manson because I realized, like, although addiction is a huge part of my world, also health, fitness, entrepreneurship, that has all become a very large part of my world as well. And so anytime I can speak with people in those industries or have a voice with those kind of people, then it's bigger reaching. And obviously the title Going Rogue kind of is me. It's my story. It's how I've done everything. I've never been that like in the box kind of person. I've done everything the backwards way or the wrong way. But ultimately it ends up being the right way.
Would you say, when you say the backwards way, Ange, could you just tell me what you mean? Because I feel like maybe societally it would be seen that way, but you took, like, it's like you're a person you had taken such a difficult situation and created gold out of it.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, I mean, anything from our modality of not labeling you an addict, not wanting to white knuckle the way through life and not subscribing to all that stuff is Going Rogue. Personally, about me, I got pregnant, then I got married, then I did this. I did everything backwards, but it all needed to happen to help me be where I am today. Like there's not always a right way or a wrong way. There's just your way. And so whatever that situation is, I mean, at one point, and this is kind of funny, but what drove me it wasn't a big decider, but on not going the route of the other business the way they wanted to go is like, you will have no colored hair. We're going to wear this certain uniform. We're going to look this certain way. And I was like, that is not me. That
Hell
is so
no.
100% not me. So we're going to go this other way and I'm going to have purple hair and I'm going to dress any way I want because that's me. And people resonate with that because it's genuine, because it's authentic. It's because you're willing to be who you are without subscribing to what society thinks you should be.
You know what? I'm positive. I know that we're swimming in the same stream. And the stream basically is we will not bow down to mediocrity and all of the systems that are in place that are supporting that. The school systems, the medical systems, the rehabs, the mental health system, like absolutely not, because really it's like you're a voice it's like all these voices that are, there's less of them, but they're much more powerful because think of the momentum going rogue. You're saying, no, bullshit. We're doing it this way. And we're going to be, you described yourself, which I thought was interesting. You said, I don't know the word, but it was like kind of like you made yourself sound small. But basically, to me, small is a new big. When you have all of these, really, because think about the big, whoever's doing the big thing, right? It kind of washes in with everything else. But the ones who are doing these little things that are impactful and different have like this punch,
Yes.
And I feel like that's what you're doing. We're not agreeing with, we're not all the pigs going off the cliff. Like, this is the way to go. You suck. You're just going to jump. You're going off the cliff with us. Just follow me.
Yeah. This is comfortable and easy and everybody's doing it. It's like,
oh, fuck that. Oh, you know what? People with clients used to say, is this normal? I mean, you better hope you're badass, but it is not normal. Don't be normal. Like showcasing your greatness and your uniqueness. Isn't that it, Ange?
It is. And so many people are afraid to do that. They're afraid to just be themselves because they're so worried about what people will think, what people will say, how it's going to affect them in a negative way. It's like, be bold and be willing to do that. People will respect and love you more for being that person.
Yes, because you're reaching their heart and they so desperately wish they could do it. But if you think like our whole society from the time we're little, we're like auto-corrected into being the norm and looking like everyone else, right? So it's like we're going to be rejected if we look different, act different, be different, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, even the purple hair, like I cannot tell you how many people come up to me and say, oh my God, I love your hair so much. And I'm like, why don't you do it? You could have purple hair. And they're like, oh, geez, I don't know, that's not really for me. And I'm like, yeah, but why? Why not let it be you? If it makes you happy and it's something you want to do it for you.
Why not be happy?
Yeah.
Why not?
And why not stand out? Why not be willing to be that person? And if people like it, great. If they don't, they're not your tribe. And that's okay. Like everybody's not for you.
Yes. What's it? David Meltzer says that no matter what you do, you're definitely going to get 10% of the population to support it. Like, even if you suck, you're going to get 10%. And
wow,
like,
10%,
and that's a lot. Like, what's 10% of 7 or 8 billion? It's a good number, right? So like, just allow it. And Andy said that last night. He was like, you're going to 50% of the people are going to like you and the other aren't, just not. Like, accept it, be 100% you. So then you get because when we're for everybody, you could be for everyone and have no one.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that's why I was so drawn to Arate. And when Andy was on my podcast, we talked about that. It's like his strength is not giving a shit about what anybody else thinks, but also recognizing there's more people like him out there, like us. And in the entrepreneur world, fitness world, all that kind of stuff, like for me, they were a beacon out there when other, very astute business people in their, ties were telling me, what I should be doing. None of that resonated with me. But what he and Ed talk about, that resonates. That makes sense to me.
And what's at the foundation of all of it, I think that is very interesting, unique, is that the business, the real key is this integrity and this adding value wherever you go. And it's like, that's your asset, and just being uniquely you, right? Isn't that's where the money is, and the interesting part is we don't chase the dollar. That's not what we make, we don't make a sale, we make a friend. Like everything is connection and relationship.
Yeah. And purpose and passion and helping.
Yeah. And so it's like, you and I are together because we made a friendship, right? That's why we're on this podcast, and it's just like one after another. It's like the freaking Matrix, girl. We got a lot of shit going on here. I never even saw the movie. I've been quoting it and I never even saw it. I gotta sit down and I know it's embarrassing. I know
gotta watch the original. Yeah, the first one. It's by far the best. And then you'll get a little hooked.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta watch it, but I understand the concept. I think I believe in it. I just didn't know they made a movie. I mean, I kind of do, but whatever. I just never watched it. I don't like movies. But listen,
Keanu Reeves is amazing in it, and it is 100%. I believe I align with that movie almost more than any other movie. 100%.
Oh, I'm gonna watch that this weekend.
Dude,
okay, so listen to me. This is our dilemma because we're such busy, badass women.
Yeah,
my friend. Our podcast has to be like this. I feel like we could go an hour. We should go another hour.
Easy.
Can we go? And then will you come on again?
Of course. And you're going to come on mine.
How and where can people find you? What would you want to say? Do you want, if people know somebody who's struggling with addiction, whatever it is, how can we get people access to you and help people get into recovery through your program in the easiest way possible, or the most streamlined?
I would say go straight to the website, elevaterehab.org. There's like a live chat because people prefer that these days. They don't want to pick up the phone, or maybe they're in their workplace or something. So a lot of people will just chat, and there's someone there on the other end for 24 hours a day that can help. There's also a phone number. You can DM me on Going Rogue Podcast on Instagram, or find me on Facebook. I will gladly help you. And listen, if we can't help you, we're going to get you where they can help you, because there's not a one size fits all, and we're not for everybody, but we are in the business to help, and we will help you get where you need to get the help you need.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight that about Ange. And what owner of a rehab is going to say, yeah, you can DM me? You know what I mean? Remember that, and the thing is that, we definitely believe in that, she's going to add value to you no matter what, and I just want to, ask that you subscribe, listen to her podcast, 5-star reviews. If you have anything shitty to say, keep walking, swipe left, don't bother. We don't give a shit about your negative comments. I'm just kidding, but not.
No, you're not.
Okay. I always say, listen, please comment, post, but if you have something bad to say, just don't. Okay. So,
although they say if you got haters, that's when you know you've made it big. It's like when you actually start getting people who take the time to hate.
I don't even think you have to be big for people to hate you, but anyhow, that's just another story. But, okay. So I love you. And listen, my girl, I want to thank you so much for being here. All of your information will be in the show notes. Do you want to say anything, what would you give as the number one thing? This is hard, kinda. Number one key to success. If you had to do one thing.
Perseverance. For me, that's why I'm here 29 years later. It's not an easy road. It's probably one of the hardest roads. And, but it's persevering through the good, the bad, the ugly, and not trying to go where the grass is greener. Is stay the course.
I could not even agree with that more. I have never, ever once stopped or gave up on my business, 30 years. And you know what? I never even thought about it.
Right.
The difficult times, it's just every time there's a problem, there's a baby system born. born. Here's another system we need.
Yeah. And it's
Yep.
adapt and I hate this word, but it's pivot. And it's like, how do we overcome it? Same. I've never had a plan B because I'm all in on this. And I think, you know, to be successful, you kind of have to be that way. Because if you're always planning your exit or your backup plan, are you fully into what you're doing?
No, it's true. It's really, it's, you know, burn your ships and just, no matter what, we're doing it. Right.
100%.
Listen, I love you. I want to thank you so much for being here. It's just nice to get to talk to you. Right.
Yeah, same. I know.
I
We're
honor
peas in
you,
a
my
pod.
friend.
We get along so good.
We do. All right, my little love bug. That's a wrap.